Ready? Hello, Gemma Fisher here. Ready to take some questions about Border Collies. I've got them all printed off from a couple of questions were from last week that I didn't get to within our 15-minute slot, and I've got two new ones. So hopefully, when I set my timer, we'll get through those questions. For those of you that are new to the group, welcome. Nice to see you here. Every Friday at 1 o'clock, I come online and I do a 15-minute free Q&A session where what you'll see is on Thursday morning, I pop up a post which just says, has anybody got any questions for me? You leave your questions in there, and then I print them out ready to answer on Fridays. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is to help as many people as possible, and I know it's not always possible for people to be part of my online memberships or be one-to-one students, that kind of thing. So hopefully, this just means that I can support people, outside of those groups. Right, okay, I'm going to ask Alexa if she can set a timer. Alexa, set a timer for 15 minutes. 15 minutes, please. All right, so first question. This is from Colin, and Colin says, my 7-month-old collie Molly is very excitable around people, mostly women. My daughter has a very high voice, and Molly goes from 1 to 10 when she hears my daughter. Do you have any thoughts on how to keep Molly calmer? Regards, Colin. So one of the things that would be interesting actually to know about this, Colin, is your daughter very young, or is she sort of an adult daughter? Because there's kind of two things going on there. I'm going to speak to like a younger child and then move on to the adults. So when we have children around dogs, they do tend to have higher pitched voices. They can be a bit shrieky at times, and that can be quite exciting for a border collie that maybe is a little bit noise sensitive. So one of the first things that we potentially want to do is we want to teach Molly what to do around your daughter so that she feels confident around her, because often if they are a little bit on edge because they're not very sure about that person, and maybe their voice kind of gets them all excited, we need to be very specific about, this is what I would like you to do, rather than telling her don't do that, don't jump up, don't bark, whatever it might be that she's doing at the moment. This is what we want to say, let's do this instead, because very important mantra is reinforcement builds behavior. All right, so reinforcement will look different from dog to dog, and mostly people think about reinforcement when I talk about it as a dog trainer in terms of dog treats and or toys, but of course anything that the dog deems valuable is a form of reinforcement. So for example, Toddy, my male border collie, me telling him, oh, you're a good boy, and making eye contact with him, that he finds hugely reinforcing. He loves being mummy's good boy. Doesn't mean I don't use treats and toys, I absolutely do, but certainly for a little bit of quiet reinforcement, that works really well for him. For Impact, my working Cocker Spaniel, she loves to be touched. So if you are to give her a little rub on her chest, that for her is very reinforcing, and she likes that sort of physical attention. So what we can sometimes get is that when people interact with our dogs, the way that they interact can actually be quite reinforcing to our dogs. So the behaviours that maybe we're seeing in our dogs that we don't like, they are exacerbated because they are being reinforced. So it can be things like, maybe your daughter is making a big fuss and going, oh, very exciting, hello, oh, and throwing their arms around and getting that to Molly might actually be something which is very exciting and is pouring reinforcement on her behaviour of jumping up, being unsettled, maybe running around madly, doing zoomies. You don't say exactly kind of what she's doing, but I'm kind of going through the excitable behaviours that a border collie might do. And jumping up, obviously jumping up can be a major one as well. So like I say, what we want to aim to teach instead is a more settled behaviour. So we're looking for maybe having a special mat or a towel that we put out when your daughter is around, and saying, okay, this is what I would like you to do. I'd like you to be nice and settled on this mat. And what I would probably do to start with is, because Molly is telling us that your daughter is quite exciting, that's what I think of as being something like a university or a PhD level difficult situation for Molly. That's what she's telling us. So what we want to do in the first instance is we want to find out what would she consider a reception school environment, what would she consider a reception school task. So what that would look like, probably for one of my dogs, is working in our sitting room or in our kitchen. None of the other dogs around, just me and them. Working with probably something not particularly high value in terms of treats, so I'm not jacking up her excitement in terms of treats. And not a lot of other stuff going on. So it's really just, it's easy for them to focus and to concentrate on the task that I'm doing. Then what I would look to do is, in that particular environment, I would look to make that more exciting. So, for example, I share a video clip in a talk that I do for other trainers about recall training. And in this clip, I show Impact working on her bed behaviour. And I'm sending her back to her bed, but I've got a pile of food down on the floor. So there's a conflict, isn't there? I'm saying go on your bed, and she's like, ugh, but there's a pile of food on the floor. I'm really excited about that pile of food. I'm like, that's not your job. Your job at this point is to go onto the bed. That environment is what I would deem a reception school environment, because it's our kitchen at home. It's just me and her. You know, it's quite low distraction in that respect. But what I've done is, by putting treats down on the floor like that, I've added an element of something more complex to really like check in and make sure that she understands the task. So what I love about like a 7-month-old Border Collie or any young dog actually is that they are really open to learning, and I think people find this really surprising, because often they find their behaviour can be quite challenging, but actually I think fundamentally they would like to please us. So when they are not pleasing us, that actually can cause them a bit of stress, which can exacerbate behaviours that look like overexcitement. Sometimes that actually can be masking a bit of stress about getting it wrong. So, yeah, teaching her something that you do want, so that you can tell her, that's brilliant, what a good dog, good girl, super, that's lovely. Nice settled behaviour, that will be really helpful. And if you go to the gemmafisher.com website and you search, I think if you just type in the word settle, you will find an entire blog post along with a video on there that explains exactly how to do that. So I would thoroughly recommend you check that out. Now, like I say, I'm mostly assuming that maybe your daughter is younger in this, but actually the advice isn't so dissimilar to an adult. And in fact, the beauty of potentially working with an adult daughter is that you could say, look, could you be conscious when you're around Molly of keeping your tone a bit lower, of trying to stay a bit calmer to help Molly, calm herself down? Because obviously it's difficult with a child to necessarily be able to A, do that, and then B, continuously do that. But hopefully with an adult, we can say to them, look, Molly's really struggling. Could you, I can totally be excited. Oh, this is really exciting. Oh, I can have my voice a very high pitch, or I can turn it into that's super, Molly. What a good girl. That's a clever girl. I can bring the energy down. So most adults should be able to do that. So that would be the thing I would potentially suggest in that situation to help Molly out. Okay. Right, Natalie. She had a question. She says, my 20-month-old collie hates small children, particularly boys. She was screamed at when she was 6 months old by a toddler boy, and I think this stems from then. How do I solve this issue safely, as muzzling her causes her more stress? So, Natalie, again, a little bit more context would potentially be helpful. It's hard to know how many small children is she around on a regular basis, because that will have an impact as well. If she was frequently having to come across small children, one of the things that I would look at is something called the muzzle up movement. And in particular, I'm not sure if it recommends it on this website, but if you go to gemmafisher.com, my website, and you type in muzzle training, you will find that there's a whole post on there which explains about the muzzle up movement, but it also gives a link to, I think it's called the muzzle shop, but as I say, it's all in the blog post. There are, generally speaking, people think about muzzles in terms of the muzzles that maybe the vet will use, and that might be a material muzzle which goes around their nose and just sort of forces their mouth shut, or it will be one of the sort of beigey brown Baskerville muzzles, which don't really leave the dog very much opportunity to pant and to breathe properly. So they're not really meant, either of those types are not really meant for long-term use. They're designed for the vet surgery so that the vet can get things done. The beauty of the Muzzle Up project and the muzzle shop is that there are many more different muzzles out there, and some of the muzzles out there are really useful for a dog to wear kind of for the length of, say, a walk. In order that we can reward the dog, we can pop treats down into the muzzle and reward them for having it on. And because of being able to do that, we can build a much more positive association than potentially your collie has at the moment with a brand new muzzle, which is completely separate to maybe the one that you've been using. So if my collie was having to be around children a lot, say they were the sort of dog that would make a beeline for them in the park, one of the things that I would be looking to do is to make muzzle training the absolute priority, because I need to make sure that I'm keeping both children safe out and about, but also I'm keeping my dog safe, because if they nip or if they cause injury to a child, understandably an adult, the parent involved in that child's care is likely to be quite upset with us, and we could end up with the police being involved, and very, very worst case scenario, something happening to the dog later on down the line. So yeah, muzzle training would be top of my priority if it was happening a lot. Meantime, the thing that I would also then be looking to do is to see about doing training safely around children. And again, this comes down to a little bit the sort of access you have to children in your life. If you have nieces and nephews, or if you have small children of your own, that will obviously be something that you might be working on. But what I would be looking to do is do what we would call a desensitization or a counter conditioning program, where at the moment the sight of a child is potentially filled with negative emotions because of the experiences or particular experience that they've had in the past. So what I'm aiming to do is to change that negative into a positive, and that's what we call this counter conditioning. So every time they see a child, something good happens. See another child, something good happens. And I like to think of it a little bit like a set of weighing scales. So at the moment, the weighing scales are heavily weighed down in the negative emotions. So that sight of a child is making the dog go, oh, I really, I don't want anything to do with children. In fact, keep them away from me, and maybe barking and lunging, in what maybe looks like quite a dangerous fashion to keep them away. And so, like I say, we want to be working on changing that imbalance towards the negative emotions into more positive ones, and we can do that in all sorts of ways. Food is really the best way to start with. Mostly people will often do things like they'll bring toys out, or they'll think about maybe bringing a favourite tennis ball out, something like that. Those things can definitely distract them from children, but what I tend to find is that they cause sort of an obsessiveness in the dog, which, whilst helpful almost in a management way, in terms of if the dog is obsessed on that, they're not thinking about the children. My concern always with that is that we're not actually seeing the dog being more comfortable around children. All we're seeing is the obsession to get the child away from them changed over into the toy or the ball that we've got out instead. My preference would always be, can I get the dog to a point where they see a child and they're like, oh yeah, there's a child. Like, they probably will not want to be the best of friends with children unless you have children in your life that they become close to, but I'm looking for kind of that tolerance to, there's a child there, I have this plan with mum or with dad, whoever I'm with, and that's fine. Like, I'm just going to keep out of their way and I'm going to mind my own business. And I've definitely worked with I remember one colleague that I worked with who really struggled with adults, never mind children, but adults who would carry on fussing her for longer than she liked, and she would kind of be looking like she was enjoying the fuss and having a nice fuss, and then she would suddenly go and that's enough, and she would kind of snap to get them away, and it would make her person very nervous about letting her say hi to people. And she was looking after a grandchild, and she's very good as a mum and a grandmum. She's a brilliant lady, and the child had kind of gone from one room to the other. She's followed them through, and she comes through, and this child has got her arms wrapped around this dog. And she said to me, her heart kind of stopped, because she was like, anxiety inducing, right? When you know what a dog can do, you're thinking, oh my gosh, what might happen? But the nice thing about all the work that she had done up until that point, and building confidence in that dog's belief that she would deal with it instead of them having to do something about it, was that the dog basically gave her a look that said, could you please deal with them? Could you just get this child off me? Rather than the dog freaking out, barking, lunging, biting, to get the child to go away. So, what's important to me always is to get to a point where the dog genuinely feels comfortable, as opposed to they're just distracted by something else. Because the thing I suppose that I worry about most, and this goes for recall training, which I know is a slight rabbit hole, but I am inclined to go and do rabbit holes, is that say we're saying, you know, there's this ball here, but there's this thing you want to go and do over here, like chase squirrels, or there's this thing that you're frightened of. Maybe I've seen another dog and I'm worried about another dog, or in this instance, a child. There's likely to be a situation where the other thing trumps the ball that you've got. And my concern then is you're stuck at that point. Like, you're really stuck at that point because you've got no way in. Whereas the goal for me would be that we are doing a transfer of value from the food, the treats, the toys that we're using into the behaviour that we're asking them to do. And I often cite the example of Toddy, my Border Collie. If you were to meet him and you were to ask him to lie down, people laugh when they meet him at workshops. He hits the deck so quickly. Like, he's down on the floor, like, within the space of a nanosecond. He loves to lie down. He loves to demonstrate that he can lie down. Hearing lie down gets him super excited. And the reason for that is there's been a transfer of value over the course of his life that the act of lying down on cue is enjoyable for him. It's reinforcing for him because of all the reinforcement that's taken place in the past. And that's what makes it reliable. And particularly around children, that would be one of the things that I would be really looking to do, because reliability in those situations is obviously massively important. Right, Alexa says that's our 15 minutes for today, so I am going to stop there. Thank you for your questions today. I appreciate them. I realised as I was going through that the couple of questions that I thought I had from last week, I had actually covered. I had a quick scan of them and I was like, I have covered them. If anybody has any questions for next week's session, then please do keep an eye out for the Thursday morning post. It comes out about 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. Go and check that out and you can leave your questions for me there. Otherwise, have a lovely weekend with your dogs. Enjoy them. And I will look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.